Andre Botha, Manager Vultures for Africa program at Endangered Wildlife Trust, joins us now to discuss this further. Very good evening to you, Mr. Botha. Thank you so much for speaking to us. So I understand that the local environment may create opportunities for illegal poisoning. Now, let's look at the Greater Limpopo Trans-Frontier Conservation Area as a known poisoning site and an exemplar. What have been the trends and how have they grown over the years?
Well, I think the insight that you just shared with your viewers clearly illustrates that, in particular, the Northern Kruger National Park and the adjacent areas is known as a major poisoning hotspot. In fact, in the last 9 years or so, since we had the first major poisoning incident there after a bit of a hiatus of a number of years, that was associated at that stage with ivory poaching, we've lost close to 2,000 vultures in the Northern Kruger National Park. And it's to a large extent decimated the breeding population in the northern half of the Kruger National Park. The incidents happen fairly regularly, and they have over the last 9 years, and it really has had a devastating effect on vultures within the Kruger National Park, but also within the wider region. We know that vultures are incredibly mobile animals that can cover several hundred kilometers in a day in their search for food. So the birds that have been killed in the Kruger National Park didn't just originate from there, but came from as far afield as Botswana. Some of them even could have originated in Zambia and then came to forage in the Kruger Park, surrounding areas, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, etc. So the area that's affected by poisoning incidents of this nature, and numerous poisoning incidents in succession, certainly has an impact much wider than the Kruger Park itself. And that is certainly reason for concern. We've seen these sorts of poisonings happen in various parts of Southern Africa in the last 15, 20 years. There have also been recent incidents even in West Africa, where in 2020 there was a mass poisoning incident in a tiny country called Guinea-Bissau on the west coast of Africa, where 2,500 vultures were poisoned at a number of sites within about a week. So poisoning is widespread. It certainly is the main driver of the decline of vulture populations across Africa. And that's one of the reasons why species like the white-backed vultures that were mentioned in your insert are currently listed as critically endangered species. Likewise, 3 other species that occur in the Kruger National Park, and then there's also 1 endangered species that occur there. And the current conservation classification is as a result, and the main driver, as I've said, of this decline that is continuing is as a result of poisoning. Not that there isn't anything being done about it. I mean, there's a lot of work happening, but I think we need to start looking at being more proactive, in particular in protected areas where we in the past assumed that protected areas like the Kruger National Park were safe havens for these birds.
So before we talk about the work that is being done, I want to look at the wider population and the number of species that currently are in the Kruger National Park. I believe just going as far back as 2014, we saw the trend begin in East Africa. So just to contextualize it on how it's moved to South Africa, this particular area of the Kruger National Park, and just how critically endangered these populations are, particularly if we were to understand the uniquely problematic socio-ecological systems that are threatened.
Yeah, I mean, in the Kruger National Park, there are currently, from what we know, there are 5 breeding species of vultures, and then there's also 1 species that breeds in close proximity to the Kruger Park that forages there regularly. And of those species, 4 are either critically endangered or endangered, and then we have 1 vulnerable species. Those species have been severely affected by poisoning, and also there are a number of other threats that impact these birds, and likewise within the wider landscape of Africa. And it's something that we've been working very hard at trying to address and to turn around. We've had good success in various parts of Africa that are also and that were also known as poisoning hotspots, where we were able to reduce the prevalence of poisoning, where we've engaged successfully with communities and made people more aware of the risks of using these chemicals. Most of them are agrochemicals that are used in agriculture, which people then use to also poison wildlife. And we've had good success in a number of areas. Our bigger challenge lies within the Greater Kruger, the surrounding area, the Greater Limpopo TFCA as well, is to have greater impact with the work that we've been doing. And I think there is a bigger need for more proactive work in terms of preventative work, engaging with people, and also identifying, and ultimately through law enforcement, identifying the perpetrators and making sure that the law enforcement component and the successful arrest and prosecution of people that commit these crimes, which it is in essence, the use of chemicals to poison wildlife is illegal in every country in SADC, and to identify the perpetrators and bring them to book and to start seeing successful prosecutions, which we have not, in particular in this area that has been so severely affected. We need arrests and we need successful prosecutions in addition to the other work that is already ongoing.
So what is missing at the moment in terms of the criminogenic scope of vulture poisoning? The interdisciplinary expert team-based approach and linkages and conservation of criminology, the trends, have they changed over the years, given the fact that poachers themselves have adapted the behavior based on the measures that are put in place?
Well, I think there have been changes, not necessarily brought about by the sort of normal issues that one would think would affect it. But, we, for instance, saw where initially the poisonings were driven by ivory poaching. That changed. The target species also changed, and carnivores, large carnivores, lion in particular, became a significant target and still is in the Northern Kruger National Park. So the target species changed. And then also with the onset of COVID in 2020, what we did notice is the prevalence of this type of poisoning also became more common in association with bushmeat poaching, where an animal would be snared, much of the meat would be removed, but then what is left of the carcass is also poisoned. And the idea there is simply just to eradicate vultures from a particular area to reduce the risk of the poachers themselves being observed, being assessed, and potentially being arrested. And that's a practice that certainly has been devastating and really has been very wasteful. So the vultures in particular were not necessarily always the target, but in cases where they were, the impact really has been devastating. But in many cases, they are not necessarily the primary target. It would be lion and etc. But any poison matter that's out there kill these birds because they fulfill the ecological function that they have evolved to do. And unfortunately, if the carcasses that they feed on are poisoned, large numbers of these birds can and have been killed.
So the interaction with communities in those areas, because I believe that the poison moves on from the non-targeted carnivores to the ecosystem itself. So if, for instance, poachers are trying to prevent rangers from determining that there are carcasses involved, how do communities help in ensuring that they protect their environment, including what passes on to the ecosystems that ends up being digested?
Yeah, I mean, we've, through South African national parks and other stakeholders, we've engaged with communities over the last 7-8 years. On the one hand, making people aware of the risks of using poisoned wildlife products, whether it's bushmeat, whether it's animal parts. If those animals have been poisoned, there is a significant risk of people themselves becoming intoxicated by handling and also by consuming these products. So a lot of work has been done through community engagements, community liaison workshops, engagement also with traditional healers organizations within these areas, is to make healers more aware of the risks associated with it. And generally our experience is once people become aware, of these risks, they are a lot more averse to just go out there and purchase whatever products are available and to consume them. But it's a long-term process, and it's a continuous process. I think one of our other challenges is that the chemicals that are used to kill animals are readily available. You can buy them over the counter. And control as far as the purchase and the management of these substances once they've been purchased has been lacking. And there we need to lean more on Department of Agriculture and other institutions that are responsible for controlling and managing the substances that are available out there, that are being sold, that are being handled, that are being stored. And that is certainly an aspect that has been sorely lacking. And that's how these chemicals end up in the wrong hands and then are used for the wrong purpose. And it's all part of engagement, awareness. But I do think a component, as I've said earlier, that really needs to step up and needs to be done more through both the South African Police Service, the conservation authorities, etc., that have the statutory powers to do so, is to also improve on the law enforcement side. I think we continue to do a lot of awareness work. We continue to engage with rangers to capacitate them. We have now trained teams of people that go in when there are poisoning incidents that take animals that are still alive. And we've had really great success in taking those animals in, successfully treating them and then releasing them back into the wild. But all of this is responsive. It's the preventative measures, I think, that needs more attention in terms of, as we've said, awareness, law enforcement, and bringing other stakeholders and departments that should take responsibility for some of this, is to step up and to engage more and to do more.
Andre Botha, thank you so much for your time. He is the head there at Vultures for Africa, a program at Endangered Wildlife Trust.